A new study links the unvaccinated to bad driving. And I just find this to be amazing because it confirms everything that I have ever felt while on the road faced with a terrible driver, that person is an idiot, that they are selfish, living in their own world. Turns out I'm not wrong. So I'm going to go into this. I'm also going to get to my connection to driving and bad drivers, and you'll see what I discuss in that realm. But first here, this is great. So from Fortune, people who skipped their COVID vaccine are at higher risk of traffic accidents, according to a new study. They go on to write, if you passed on getting the COVID vaccine, you might be a lot more likely to get into a car crash. Or at least those are the findings of a new study published this month in the American Journal of Medicine. During the summer of 2021, Canadian researchers examined the encrypted government-held records of more than 11 million adults, 16% of whom hadn't received the COVID vaccine. They found that the unvaccinated people were 72% more likely, that is a big number, 72% more likely to be involved in a severe traffic crash in which at least one person was transported to the hospital than those who were vaccinated. That's similar to the increased risk of car crashes for people with sleep apnea, though only about half that of people who abuse alcohol, researchers found. The excess risk of car crash posed by unvaccinated drivers, quote, exceeds the safety gains from modern automobile engineering advances and also imposes risks on other road users, the authors wrote. Of course, skipping a COVID vaccine does not mean that someone will get into a car crash. Instead, the authors theorize that people who resist public health recommendations might also neglect basic road safety guidelines. So, I'm going to get to more in terms of what they theorize may be the connection between car crashes or bad driving and the unvaccinated. But come on, it's obvious, right? People that are selfish on the road end up more likely to be in car accidents, also live their lives as more selfish individuals, living in their own world, don't really care about their impact on others, don't really care about what society is doing to move forward. Nope, they'll do what they want to do regardless. That's the definition of a bad driver. Now, I will say, of course, look, not every single person, I shouldn't have to say this, but it should be obvious, but I'll say it. Not every single person who is unvaccinated is selfish. Not every single person who is, or sorry, what did I say? Not every single person who's unvaccinated is selfish. Not every single person who is vaccinated is, caring of others and unselfish. It's just to point out that this is generals, right? Like this is what data deals with, is generally what is the impact here. And we're looking at 11 million people. That's a lot. Most studies don't have anywhere near 11 million people. So 11 million people, this is a lot of data to work with, and the connection is clear. There's also, of course, a lot of data around how narcissism is a driving hazard. So I will link to this below the video. There are 3 studies on this in particular that they reference here from Ohio State University and the University of Luxembourg. So I'll link to that under sources on YouTube, as I link to all my sources on YouTube. But in terms of this piece in Fortune, so they say here, why would they ignore the rules of the road? Distrust of the government, a belief in freedom. Now, I will say, let me just pause here. It depends what you distrust the government on. If you completely trust the government, something's wrong with you. So it depends what we're talking about, right? So I criticize whoever's in government, whether it's Trump, Biden, or in Canada, whether it's, Trudeau or conservative, regardless, it's important to be critical of those in power and what they are doing with that power, who they're listening to, which often, of course, tends to be corporations and big money. So distrust in government is a weird general statement that I don't think really makes any sense to reference here, but they do. They also write a belief in freedom, which again, what do you mean by freedom? Freedom to, like, for example, freedom to me is, let's compare healthcare systems, Canada versus the US. Freedom to me is being able to go and get healthcare without going into medical debt and going bankrupt. That's freedom. But you tell that to an American, a conservative, Medicare for all to them is crazy far left communism. So freedom is all in the eye of the beholder, how you actually define freedom. Again, I don't care for how they are writing some of this. But they also go on to write misconceptions of daily risks, quote, faith in natural protection, antipathy toward regulation, poverty, misinformation, a lack of resources, and personal beliefs are potential reasons proposed by the authors. The findings are significant enough that primary care doctors should consider counseling unvaccinated patients on traffic safety, and insurance companies might base changes to insurance policies on vaccination data, the authors suggest. I am perfectly okay with this because it likely means that my rates may drop. But look, the data's there. The connection is there. If you're going to try and figure out who to charge more in you're an insurance company and who deserves to pay less, why not use this data as a basis for that? Now, there's a reason. You could say, well, your insurance company shouldn't have access to your medical records. I understand that, and I agree. That said, if it was public and they could have access to it and there wasn't a problem there or any other connection to anything else and they didn't have access to any other medical records, hey, I should save on my insurance and you should pay more. But, that's obviously my own selfish perspective on this issue. Going on, though, so there's also, they also write, first responders may also consider taking precautions to protect themselves from COVID when responding to a traffic crash. The authors added, as it's more likely that a driver is unvaccinated than vaccinated, which again is just kind of a, funny impact here. But there's also this study when I was researching, I found this, and this just amazed me. Bad driving may have genetic basis. So bad drivers in part have their genes to blame, suggests a new study by neuroscientists. People with a particular gene variant performed more than 20% worse on a driving test than people without it, and a follow-up test a few days later yielded similar results. About 30% of Americans have the variant, which would coincide with about 30% of the voting population that, is completely in love and part of Trump's cult. I wonder if there's a connection there. I wonder if you get a bunch of MAGA on the road together. Is it just like a demolition derby? Like, what happens at that point? But this is, I find this to be, I wonder what that gene is, what else that gene's connected to. Maybe the study has more. I'm not going to read the entire study, but I'll link to that below the video if you want to go through it. Last thing here. So this is the only time, this is my personal connection to this, when I'm a bad driver. So this is from Park Insurance here, from a recent study that indicates good drivers become bad drivers when they are confronted with poor driver conduct. I will say I'm a great driver. I have to admit it. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, no pun intended, but I'm a good driver. I care about others on the road. I always use my signal, even if no one's around. Maybe that's dumb, but I do it just, as a force of habit. I never use the passing lane unless I'm passing somebody. You're not going to sit in that lane and go slow like a lot of jerks or assholes do. But I'm a good driver. The only time when I'm a bad driver is when I'm faced with a bad driver. And that person pisses me off and maybe gets me angry to the point that I am a little less alert on the road. So I think this makes total sense. They say here, by remaining conscious of this, you make sure that you do not allow the actions of others to impact your own emotions and performance on the road. So I have to work more on that. I'm honest. I'm open. I have flaws. My flaws are when you suck at driving, I suck at driving. So the lesson here is get the vaccine and be better at driving. No, clearly that isn't the connection. But if you are unvaccinated, hey, the data showcases you are more likely to be a shitty driver. I'm not sure what you do with this information. Maybe send this to your friends that are both unvaxxed and bad drivers. But regardless, this is just for me another example of how some people are so disconnected and living in their own world, and how it can negatively impact the rest of us that actually care.